So, you know how when you're working on your short film and you got this great shot of a super cool spaceship and it explodes and then you have your Amish dude, he runs out and then there's nothing there. There's nothing in the windows, there's no lights on him. It doesn't look like he's looking at anything. That's when you realize, oh, okay, I gotta make this a visual effect shot. All right, we're gonna start with a brand new comp. We're gonna set our window to mid-flow vertical and then save it. We're gonna load in our footage. First things first, we're gonna right click, set render range. I'm gonna copy that over to this as well. Next, I'm gonna turn off high Q and motion blur. We don't need those on while we're working. In fact, I'm actually gonna do this. I'm gonna right click and go to 4. That's just gonna make our footage a little bit lower resolution, but a little bit quicker to work with. Next, we need to get our footage into linear. To do that, we're gonna use a color space transform node. We're gonna set the top to red wide gamut and red log 3G10. Then you're gonna wanna turn off tone mapping, turn off white point adaptation, turn off pre-divide post multiply. Great, now it looks even worse. To give us something that's easier to look at, we're gonna go into edit, color space transform, open up edit, and we're gonna take this right back to where we were. Turn off all these guys. And then we're also gonna right click on this viewer, LUT, add new, Fusion view LUT, into edit. I'm gonna be including in the footage file the final LUT that we used for the final color grade in the actual film. So to get there, you're just gonna wanna go into high footage and choose the LUT. Great, that looks pretty all right. Next, I'm gonna denoise the footage so that at the end I can throw film grain over the whole thing. I use need denoise, but Fusion does have a built-in noise removal tool. To denoise our footage, we're gonna go into prepare noise to denoise. All right, do that. Then we're gonna hit adjust in preview, zoom in a little bit, make sure we're not taking away too much detail. That's a little bit more than I'd like. So we're just gonna go into temporal denoise and reduce this down to about 70% maybe. Then we'll go into spatial. Then to avoid having to process these two nodes, we're actually going to create a saver. We're going to go into the high footage, create a new folder, call this denoised plate, and inside of that, denoised plate.exr. And take this to float 16, DWA, and turn off all these guys. Quick side note, we're going to be using a few tools from Reactor. If you don't know what Reactor is, it's basically a need-to-have plugin for Fusion that's maintained by the guys over at We Suck Less. Once you've downloaded Reactor, you're just going to want to go to Open Reactor, and then search the following two tools. Wireless, if we scroll down, you're going to want to use Wireless Fuse, and the other one is going to be Xglow. Once we're done rendering, you're going to create a loader, and bring in that footage of the denoised plate. You can also just disable these while you're at it. I like to work in a mix of a vertical flow and a horizontal flow at the same time. You'll kind of see how I like to branch things as we go. What I've done is copy and pasted the color space transform node from up here down to here, enabled it, and then just hit swap. Nice. We're going to create a little bit of space, and then create a saver node. And this, we're going to go straight into the out, final, version 1, and we'll say fire in the whole final out VO1. And then inside of that, we're gonna do the same settings as before, DWA float 16. Now we're gonna do another preparatory step. We're gonna generate some normal maps for our footage. First, drop a Relight node. You'll see that the Relight node has a couple of options here. We could just create our mask directly inside of this node, but that's gonna be a little bit slower than what I'd like to do. So to make this a little bit faster, we're gonna go to output surface map. If I turn off the viewer, you're gonna see what looks to be a normal map. This is being generated on the fly by Fusion. We're gonna create normal map, Relight, copy that, paste that, _.exr. DWA will work just fine for this as well. And then once again, we're gonna render this all out. All right, now that the render's done, we're gonna disable that and bring in a loader. Now we're gonna create two more Relight nodes. We're gonna name this one Face Relight and this one Chest Relight. Then to get our base plate back, I'm gonna copy and paste one of these, pump this into the back, and then use the normal map in the green slot. Now you'll see that you have this relight function. As you move the light around, It's using the normal map that we've created to kind of relight the image. If it looks a little funky, try turning on and off your display. Right now, we want it off. After some playing around, these are the values that seem to work the best. It's a little difficult to tell what each one does individually, especially contrast, which seems to be that the lower you make it, the higher the contrast is. Not entirely sure about that. But yeah, these are what I suggest going with. The first problem you're going to notice though is if you hit play, the light itself isn't actually moving with this face. So right now the light would look like it's flickering all over the place as it moves position. So we're going to have to fix that. To get it to track his face, we're going to create a tracker. So let's first create an underlay here. And that way we know that these are all grouped together. Then we're going to go to the side and create a tracker. Let's put our footage into the tracker. We're going to call this nose tracker. We're actually going to delete this IntelliTrack and create a point track instead. Let's go to about the middle of our footage, then grab this point track and bring it over to a schnoz. You might notice that when we move the tracker, everything goes black. For some reason, this is done because the proxy's on, so we're going to want to turn this off while we're doing our tracking. Now you'll see that everything comes back. We're going to use our cute Amish boy. We're going to use my cute little buddy Race's nose right here to get our track going. So line up both of his schnoz points. And then go ahead and reduce the tracking area a little bit. Then we're going to go ahead and track. Now as you can tell, that was fucking terrible. So let's go back to a frame. And let's see what we can do a little bit differently. This time let's try and grab one single nostril and make the search size just a little bit bigger. If it jitters around a little bit, that's okay. We just want to get a rough approximation. We lose it a little bit up here. So for these frames, we're just going to go until we lose the nose, which is right here. I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these in-between frames here. If you don't have this editor up, you can go to keyframes. We're going to just go ahead and delete these. And then for this final keyframe, we'll just manually drag this onto his nose. And that should follow close enough. Maybe we'll create one more. To create a new keyframe, you'll have to actually hit the track button and then go back and then move it manually. Yeah, that's close enough. Now we're actually going to go into modifiers and we're going to rename this to schnoz track. You'll understand why in a little bit. I'm also going to create an underlay for all of our tracked items here. We're going to go ahead and rename that to trackers. All right, what the fuck else do we do? I'm also going to change the color of this underlay to orange just to separate things out a little bit. All right, back in our relight node, we're going to now go to light source and right click, connect to schnoz track position. We could go to the nose tracker, but I don't like using these settings. They're a little more difficult to use. So we're going to go to schnoz track position. Now you'll see that the relight node is following his nose, and it gives us a much more consistent result. The problem is, in our footage, he's looking up, which means that the explosion is probably above him, which means that the light is also above him. So to fix this, we're going to go into the relight, we're going to go into the modifier, and we're going to choose to move this center up a little bit. So now what it's doing is it's kind of treating it as if the light is above his head. A little bit higher, a little lower. All right. You could be more exact with this, but I think this is going to be fine for our purposes. The next thing we're going to do is go to our chest relight. For this relight, I want to focus things down on the bottom of his clothes and make it a little bit more contrasty. For this, we're going to use the exact same track. We're just going to use a different offset value. The problem is that we can't connect it to the exact same position. As you can see, it keeps that offset no matter what. So we're going to actually head over to our tracker, and we're just going to duplicate it. We'll call this chest tracker. Go to the modifier and rename this chest track. Now we go here, light source, connect to chest track position. Now into the modifier, we can move this separately, and it won't affect this one. Go nice and down. Great. Now we need to turn these into proper masks. So we're going to create a bitmap node, plug that into here, and to get it to pull the matte data correctly, we're going to go into luminance. Just to give it a little more contrast, I'm also going to pull this up to about 2.4. I'm also going to give it just a little bit of a soft edge. Then we can copy and paste that bitmap, drop it into here. To combine these two masks, drag this into the blue guy here. And then instead of merge, we're going to change this to add. Now returning to our main flow, we're going to create a color corrector. We'll call this flicker. On the color corrector, we're going to go back into proxy mode and turn on our display. To flicker our footage, we're going to boost the gain about 2.4 and move this over just a little bit into more of an orange. As you can tell though, this is changing all of the footage, which is why we're using our relight nodes to kind of isolate areas a little bit better. To isolate things, we're going to take our bitmap and put it into the blue. As you can see, now the effect is a little bit more isolated. However, we want to do a bit more. We're not going to go through rotoscoping today, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste these mats from a different comp. You'll see that the 4 mats that we've brought in are for the right pull, just towards the end of our shot, the general area of this right window, this left area over his shoulder, and this left pull. We're then going to combine them all with merge nodes. Now you can see that our relight is a lot more focused and specific. You can also do this area up here, but for artistic reasons, to draw your eye more towards this side of the scene, I chose not to. Actually, I'm lying, I just didn't notice until now. So now we've relit our footage and it looks pretty good. But to get that flicker effect, we're gonna have to do one more thing. First, we're gonna create a custom tool. Inside the custom tool, go to the config and turn off everything. The only thing you're gonna keep on is this one right here. Back in the controls, you're gonna wanna hit this and then rename flicker tool. Then let's go back to our flicker, and the blend, we're gonna hit expression and then drag this guy here. Nice. Now we can use this to control the brightness. So what we're gonna do is right click, modify with, perturb. In the modifier, this top value is basically our middle value, everything that it's gonna bounce around. The seed we don't have to touch. The strength we're gonna bring down to just about 0.6. The wobble we're gonna turn up to 2.94. And the speed will change to 3. I found these just through messing with settings to see what looked good. It's a subtle effect, but it works well. Now we have the relight and the flicker of the relight, but there's nothing to suggest that he's looking at an explosion. To do that, we're gonna make a bit more space down here. And we're gonna use one of my favorite nodes called the wireless node. This is one of the ones we got from Reactor earlier. We can also turn off this pin. We're gonna rename this to base plate. And then scroll back up and just drag our plate into here. And now we can access that from here as well. Next, we're gonna grab our same right window garbage mask and copy and paste that over here. Then we're gonna create a luma keyer and a delta keyer. For the luma keyer, we're gonna plug in the base plate and we're gonna plug in our right window into the garbage mask, which is the dark gray one. We're also gonna plug it in the dark gray of the delta keyer as well. Also make sure to go into the right window and invert the mask. Now we've isolated this window area. In the luma keyer, what we're trying to do is isolate some of these door elements. So we're gonna bring this all the way down to about 0.116. Then we're gonna bring this to 0.08. Then we're gonna blur it out and add just a little bit of an expand. Make sure to post multiply the image. Then heading into our delta keyer, plug in the base plate. The goal here is to get as much of the window as possible. Through experimentation, this is the color that I ended up landing on. We're gonna jump straight to matte. Inside of here, we're also gonna draw this threshold really tight. Now we need to combine all of these masks together. To do that, we're gonna start with a bitmap and drag our delta keyer into it. Then we're gonna hit invert. Next, we'll create another bitmap, and this time we're gonna drag our luma keyer in. Once again, we're gonna pipe this one into here, and then go to add. We have another mask here. This next mask is just gonna follow the exact lines of the window. You can do this with a quick roto. This one we wanna be a little bit more precise. We'll drag this in, and we're gonna change the paint mode of this one to minimum. So we're gonna drag another bitmap node, but this needs to go into the orange. Then we're gonna increase the soft edge just a little bit, and we're gonna hit invert. Then we're gonna copy and paste the right window, drag this into here, and just bring the border width down a little bit. I'm gonna bring in 2 more rotos. This one is just this part of the gate right here. Again, it's just gonna be a quick roto, and then this little patch window right here. Once again, quick roto. We'll plug this guy in here. This one we're gonna set to subtract to remove that part of the bar. And then this one we're gonna set to merge because we want that part to be white. We're also gonna give it a little bit of a soft edge. I know this isn't the best looking mask, but trust me, this will work just fine. We're now gonna move on to the explosion. The explosion that I'm using is actually a paid asset, so I can't include it, but there looks like there's some pretty good ones at this link right here. I'll also put this link in the description. The first thing we're gonna do is crop this. So we're just gonna drop this down to 717, 930, and this will obviously depend on whatever footage you're working with. Then we're gonna drop an optical flow node. You can actually drop this just a little bit. And we can click half resolution as well. Then we're gonna go to the time stretcher node, and we're gonna slow this way down. The reason that we're doing this is right now, this is a pretty fast explosion. But really large explosions move a lot slower. So if we retime this to be a lot slower, then it'll look like it's a bigger explosion. So in the time stretcher node, we're actually gonna set frame 0 to be a little bit further back. I'm gonna quickly create 2 different screens here. and just go to our base plate so we can use this as a reference point. So we're not going to need the explosion until about right here. I'm going to start when we actually have a little bit of detail here, and then keep going till about here. Let's see. We might adjust this a little bit as we go, but that's good for now. I'm also going to add a color corrector node and just make it a little bit more red. I'm also going to go ahead and go pre-divide post-multiply. To make this easier to track into the scene, I'm actually going to add another crop node. I'm going to make sure this is the correct resolution, and then hit keep centered so I can get this right in the center of my footage. Then I'm going to throw down a blur node. We'll turn that up to about 4. And then a matte control node. The matte control node, we're going to plug in our mask from earlier into the green section. Now if we create a merge node in our main flow, and we go to plug this in, you'll see that that doesn't quite look right. First thing we're going to do is change this to lighten. You could also do an add operation, which if you go to normal and turn your alpha gain all the way down, that's the same as doing an add. But for this, lighten ended up looking a little bit better for some reason. As you can see though, we're not getting an explosion. That's because the explosion's in the wrong area. We need to move it into the right area, but if we just do the transform node, it's not actually going to track into the correct place. So we're going to have to do a couple things here. To make this easier on ourselves, we're just going to track something on the right side of the frame and then have the explosion follow that. If we scroll with our footage, there's nothing on the window itself that would be a perfect track, but there is this doorknob right here, and we only lose it about right here, and we can do that manually pretty easily. So we're going to go ahead and track that. Let's throw down a tracker node, put our base plate into it, just to make this a little more organized. And then let's go into this tracker node, and let's call this explosion tracker. Let's go all the way to the end, click on our tracker, and then bring the IntelliTrack right in front. Let's turn off proxy again. Let's go ahead and hit track both ways. So this did super well up until we actually lost it, which is great. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep going. Let's go all the way until we lose the window, which is right here. We're gonna go ahead and drag this last keyframe over here, and then we're gonna go back until we lose doorknob. All right, this is our last good keyframe, and let's delete everything between those two. Now what it's gonna do is interpolate between these two keyframes. However, this is not where we want this. So let's go ahead and drag this keyframe all the way off camera. And essentially what we need to do here is guess where that doorknob should be. Feels like it would be right around here. So let's go ahead and try that one more time. We can also refine this as we go once we have the explosion in. That looks actually like it's maybe a little too far. Let's get a little bit closer. We're just kind of eyeballing this, but it doesn't have to be exact. Great, that should be close enough. So now I'm going to drag this tracker down here, just so when we come back to this comp later on, we know where it is. So let's go into our explosion tracker, modifiers, and let's rename this to doorknob. And then in our transform for the explosion, right click, connect to doorknob position. If we go back to our merge node, you can see that we're starting to get there. First thing we're going to do is just drop down this gain a decent amount. About 112 is where I landed before. Next, let's go back into this transform node, and under modifier, let's also adjust these offsets until it's a little more centered. If we go back to here and go to the transform, we can also bring up the size of this so that it fills up more of the screen. Now we're getting somewhere. To preview this just a little bit faster, I'm just going to disable this node for now. Before we forget, we're going to want to turn on the motion blur inside of this transform node for the explosion as well. I also want the explosion to look a little bit more like it's in front of him, so we're actually going to modify this just one more time. A little more to the left. Let's add some glow. So let's drop that X-Glow node that we downloaded earlier, pull the matte control into here, and create a new merge node. This new merge node, we're actually going to use an add operation, so we're going to keep this on normal and just drag the alpha gain all the way down. Then going into our X-Glow node, let's bring the iterations to 8, click glow only, and then bring this blend way down. About 0.03 should be good. Yeah, that looks good. Then we're going to do one more soft glow. Drag this in, drag this over, and the same thing. Add mode, blend down to 0.15. For the soft glow, we're actually going to bring this down just a little bit. About 1.6. And then the glow size, we're going to make 100. There we go. And bring this down just a little bit. Before moving on to the left window, I've gone ahead and organized the flow a little bit. I then copied these nodes and brought them down for the left window. One thing that's different here is this left window mask. This is just covering this left window, much like the right one. This one can just be one single mask. We're going to use the exact same explosion asset, but we still need to track this left side. So what we're going to do first is grab a wireless node and grab the same original plate. Now let's create a tracker. We'll call this left window track. I noticed this little thing right here. I I think this should be good for our tracking purposes. Let's use an IntelliTrack for this one. Alright, it's definitely going to lose it pretty quick, but that's alright. We only need it to be when the window's actually here, which is pretty short. So, same as before, we're going to grab another wireless node. We're going to grab just the ending of this guy. So now this is our explosion. And put this into the transform. In the tracker, rename this to something like left window. And then here, connect to left window position. Now, if we go into the merge node, you'll probably need to move this over until it's in front of the window. Now, if we take a look, same setup as before. We're looking pretty good. Hell yeah. I'm gonna adjust this just a little bit. We're gonna move this over. Kind of same thing. We want it to seem like the explosion's more kind of in front of him. Ooh, you know what we're gonna do too? So actually, let's go to this explosion, create another transform node. We're gonna flip this. So now it kind of looks like the explosion's going up to the left. Originally it looked like it was going up to the right. Then if we go back here, modifier, let's see, that feels pretty good. Yeah, nice. Let's go back up to our flicker, turn that guy back on. Oh, wait, was I? Oh no, I was recording. Now the final thing we need is just to add a little bit of film grain. These settings looked right for the footage that I had before. Oh, no it doesn't. These film grain settings looked about right for me. One more thing we're gonna do is drop down a file LUT node, grab that same LUT from before, add another saver. I like to use my downloads as a temp folder, so I'm gonna throw a preview version into my downloads. For this, let's just set it to H.264, and these are all looking good too. Now when we hit render, it's gonna create the final EXR and a preview at the same time, so we can double check our work immediately. Then hit go.